Hello, everybody. I just want to mention my Substack. I said the 10 most naturally gifted chess players in modern chess history. So I'm only going to rank the players post 1970s. You know, Sultan Khan, I think, was listed as British, even though he was from India, effectively, I think. But he was a naturally gifted. He was considered to be actually one of the most naturally gifted chess players ever. You know, often when you talk about who are the most naturally gifted chess players ever, names like Capablanca, Morphy, Bobby Fischer, obviously, Mikhail Tal, Magnus Carlsen, Anatoly Karpov, Vichy Anand, Garry Kasparov. I'll probably do a separate video on that as well, right? Because that's also an interesting topic. I think Sultan Khan would be up there as well, because he was somebody who was known to not know a lot of theory, but he had great results. Jonathan Penrose wasn't a full-time professional as far as I'm concerned, as far as I'm aware. So he would also probably rank up there. Now, as far as talent in chess is similar to talent in music and mathematics and stuff like that. I think talent does exist. Some people say talent doesn't exist and it's irrelevant. I think there is an element of talent. I don't think it's more important than working hard. I think if you look at the top players in the world, like someone like Magnus Carlsen, why has he become the top player in the world? It's not just because he's talented. He doesn't sit around all day and never do any chess, but he also works hard. So to be one of the top players in the world, you've got to be talented and work hard. So the people on this English list, rank in that category, they were talented. There's 2,200 players out there possibly as talented as these players. 2,000 players, but they just never did any work or, never really applied themselves potentially. Liu Mishane, great player, so I've put him as number one. Not everyone would agree with that. Number two, Michael Adams. I think a lot of people would rank Michael Adams as number one. I think if you did a poll, everybody would probably put Michael Adams as number one, which is understandable. I think he's naturally phenomenally gifted as well. But I put Luke Mishane as number one. The reason I put Luke Mishane as number one is I think people easily forget the impression that he made when he first came on the scene. People were predicting not just that he'd be British champion, but that he would actually be world champion. And I've often said in the commentaries, when I've done the commentary of the British, I'm surprised that Luke Mishane hasn't won the British by now, because he hasn't actually played it that often. If you look at the statistics, he hasn't played the British Championships that often, which is surprising. But the years that he has played, he's often gone very close to winning it and been unlucky in playoffs. I think he lost it in playoff in Hull in 2018, lost in the playoff Llandudno 2017. I'm not sure if he's lost in any other playoffs, but he's been unlucky in that respect. Michael Adams is a phenomenal player. Then we drop down to Nigel Short. I think Nigel Short, I said he was at the forefront of the English chess evolution. I should say revolution, really. That's probably what I meant. Fought against Garry Kasparov. So Nigel Short is obviously one of the best English players ever. There's no question about that. He was probably the first player that... We had this period after the Bobby Fischer chess explosion really inspired us as a chess nation. And I wrote in a previous blog about how that actually was became like we became a victim of our own success, because we had all these like stars that emerged, like Nigel Short, Michael Adams, Tony Miles, John Spielman, John Nunn. Actually, I forgot to mention John Spielman in this blog. I probably should have changed it and put John Spielman in there, potentially, because I've completely. It's very. I wrote this in 5 minutes, and I've probably forgot a lot of names actually. John Spielman, phenomenally talented player as well. Raymond Keane, all these kind of people, right? But Nigel was probably the first player to emerge from that. Adams later on, but Nigel was the first player to emerge who potentially could become world champion. Now, as Garry Kasparov wrote in his book, one of his books, Nigel's bad luck was that he was born in a similar era to Garry Kasparov, Garry himself, right? So that's why he didn't become world champion. We then move on to David Howe. David Howe, much younger player than some of these people that I've already mentioned. Obviously, that came much later. 1990, he was born. So same year, it was in that vintage year with Magnus Carlsen. David is very good friends with Magnus. Has obviously not done his chess career any harm to be good friends with, arguably the best player of all time. But David, forgetting about Magnus, David in his own right is a very, very strong player, and I played him, when he was quite young. He was, I think, about 4, 5, 6. I think possibly he was 6 at the time, and I played him in a similar course, and I was doing the symbol. Fortunately, David wasn't doing the symbol at that point. That would have been kind of embarrassing, but I played him, and I remember him being a pretty good player even by that point, and he beat John Nunn when he was quite young. So I put number 5, Tony Miles, and Tony did was extraordinary, becoming the first English GM. He also competed at the highest level of chess in the 1970s, 1980s. Tony Miles was the first English GM, and he was a bit of a maverick. I think he was a bit of a lone wolf type of personality, and he dropped out of Birmingham University where he studied mathematics. And because he preferred the idea of just being his own person essentially, and he could do that in the chess world. He could just do his own thing. Julian Hodgson I put as number 6. Julian, well, actually out of that list, the only one who's no longer with us, Tony Miles. So Tony Miles passed away from diabetes. I think he had a heart attack because of brought on by diabetes. So that was very sad. But yeah, I mean, to become English GM, the first English GM, phenomenal. Then we move on to Julian Hodgson. Julian Hodgson is a 3-time British champion. Julian became British champion, I think, first time in the 1990s, potentially. And in the late 1990s, he added 2 more, Scarborough and Millfield. And Julian was always a very natural talent. I think he didn't really know a lot of theory. We move on to Matthew Sadler. Now, Matthew Sadler is a hard worker, but, this is what I was saying before. To become a world-class player, you've got to have talent as well. You've got to have both. And I think that's what Sadler had. He was a very good junior. He was a hard worker, but I think all these players were hard workers on chess. They're all obsessed with chess. Maybe he was more open about the fact that he worked hard compared to some of the others, and I think he became a world-class player. Essentially became very close to breaking into the elite. But I think he realised that even if you get to 2680, 2690, you're not guaranteed to get an easy living. So he decided to drop out of chess and or full-time playing. He stopped playing full-time, but phenomenally gifted player. Then you move on to Gawain Jones. And Gawain is a huge chess talent, full stop. Great fighting spirit. Yeah, turned around many bad positions during the course of his career. I think Gawain is just very big natural talent. John Nunn as well, I've listed. John was one of the youngest to enter a university since something like Cardinal Wolsey. Many centuries ago, when I think he entered Oxford when he was about 15 to study mathematics. So that in itself is a sign that you're obviously quite an exceptional person. I was reading about Bobby Fischer earlier. Bobby Fischer was rumoured to have been fathered by a Hungarian or Croatian physicist or scientist called Paul Neromany. So it might well be that kind of talent is genetic. If you're good at mathematics, you're also good at chess in a lot of cases. Mikhail Tal was also good at maths and was also good at playing a musical instrument. Penrose, I mentioned earlier, I think his brother is still around now. Roger Penrose. So Roger Penrose was a contemporary of Stephen Hawking, and so he's a very famous physicist in his own right. And Matthew Sadler's brother, I believe, was quite an accomplished pianist. So there's a lot of genetic crossover, and having those kind of talents is quite similar. So yeah, it's almost like like horse racing. You've got your stables, and you've got your sires, your super sires, your Galileos. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. But John Nunn is obviously a very bright guy. And Magnus Carlsen actually made a comment that John Nunn potentially was maybe too bright to be world champion, because he was also focused on other stuff. And to be world champion, world chess champion, you have to be completely focused. But ultimately, he was probably a worse player than Garry Kasparov, who was really the dominant force at that time. So, you know, that was what it comes down to. You get to a high level, got to a very high level, but a little bit like with Nigel, there's like a level you can't go beyond. Murray Chandler, I put a number 10. Now again, Spielman, I forgot about Spielman. I forgot about Dre. I probably would have put Spielman. No disrespect to Murray. If I'd have remembered about Jonathan Spielman, for some reason that I probably would have put Murray as number 11. So I might edit it and put Jonathan Spielman as number 10, and then shuffle Murray down to number 11. I might edit it later. But Murray Chandler came to England from New Zealand, and you know, again, players in that period who got to 2600, you know, you really had to do it on merit, because there weren't computers like you had there, and then ChessBase was like a sort of more formative. You're talking about the sort of like early 1980s into the early 1990s. It's kind of where Murray Chandler was really successful, was in that period, maybe even late 70s he came to England. I think Bob Wade had also come to England from New Zealand, so there was a bit of history there. Anyway, that's my... I would probably put, like I say, probably put John Spielman up there. Other names also come into the mix, you know. I think people like David Norwood is very good at blitz, William Watson. If you're talking about modern chess history, post 1970s, also younger players, people like Ravi Haria, Daniel Fernandez, Amit Gartzi, Mark Hebden's obviously won a load of tournaments. You know, his good friend, or he used to be good friends, Keith Arkle, Peter Wells, you know, all these people. Anyone who can, Simon Williams I should mention as well. Simon Williams, great attacking player. Anyone who can become a grandmaster has quite a lot of talent. But you generally find like the elite, the difference, I would say, when I played British Championships, one of the things I've noticed, the elite players, like the 2600 players, they don't go out during the evening most of the time. They might go out at the end of the tournament. They don't go out during the... I forgot about the Perts as well. You know, Perts, Nick Perts also won a British. Brother Richard also made a GM. Marcus Harvey, people like that. It's just, Lee Bullock, I would say, possibly is one of the most naturally gifted chess players from England. Anyway, leave your comments down below. Do you agree with some of what I've said about who I think the most talented players are? You know, I think that's quite an... It tends to be that the most, you know, the best players are also the most talented. So that's kind of what I put on the list. But you could, if you were going more obscure, you know, there's probably 2,000 players out there who are more naturally gifted than me. But I've just put a lot more work in than they have. I think I've also got quite a lot of talent at chess relative to what I've got at other things, because, you know, when I was younger, my dad taught me and my sister to play, and chess was something I picked up straight away. Now I don't tend to pick up things straight away in anything, so the fact I picked it up straight away was a sign I had some talent for chess. But would I make the top 10 when the other players have all gotten over 2600? Probably not. So that's my list. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? I'll probably change the number 10 and I'll put Spielman in at number 10 and shuffle Murray down to number 11. You could even put Spielman above Nunn and Gawain. You know, Spielman was a great player in his prime. He still is very strong, of course. He was 2660 and he defeated Nigel Short in a candidates match. Anyway, please, I'll leave the link down below to the post. Please subscribe to my Substack, because it's quite a good Substack. Anyway, that's my and again, please like and subscribe this video, because then it will get promoted on the algorithm.